The probability that we're seeing the truth of reality is zero. Everything that I'm perceiving with my senses in three-dimensional reality is fooling me into the illusion of separation. Time is the separation between 2 points of consciousness, so you could actually shorten the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it.
Wow.
One of the most sought-after speakers in the world.
New York Times best-selling author,
a pioneer in emerging science and spirituality.
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Joe Dispenza.
They tell me I'm going to be paralyzed either way, so why don't I roll the dice, right, and just take a chance? There's an intelligence that's giving me life, okay? It's a consciousness. It must be aware of me.
And you essentially had a pact with consciousness, God, the universe, and said, if I'm healed, I will commit my life to this.
I was educated. I knew a lot about the spine. I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons that are telling me, you're never going to walk again. There's energy for miracles. We see them all the time. There's energy for healing. We see it all the time. There's energy for the mystical. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
And you collapse time and space. And when you do that, then the synchronicities, serendipities, the coincidences, the opportunities start to prove to you that you're actually the creator of your life instead of the victim of your life. If your vision is to be wealthy, if your vision is to be in love, if your vision is to be, I don't know, whatever it is, to have a mystical experience, and you're here, I tell my kids this from the time they were little.
I'm so excited about this episode with Dr. Joe Dispenza. He is one of our biggest guests of all time with over 55 million views on our videos. So if you like this, make sure to share it with one friend and leave a like or a comment below. Also, big announcement, Dr. Joe is a keynote speaker at this year's Summit of Greatness in Los Angeles in September. Make sure you get your tickets. The link is below, or you can go to summitofgreatness.com to see Dr. Joe live. Welcome back, everyone, to the School of Greatness. Very excited about our guest. We have the inspiring Dr. Joe Dispenza in the house. Good to see you once again, my friend.
Great to be with you, Louis, as always.
Very excited. I was telling you beforehand that our interviews on YouTube have done over 55 million views together over the last 5 years since we've had you on, many different interviews.
How many interviews have I done?
Probably 5, I'm assuming. Wow. 4 or 5. And maybe 6, I don't know. But people love when you're on here. I've been to your event, 7-day, week-long event that is incredible. And the things I witnessed there within myself about how my mind and my body transformed was so powerful. And the things I witnessed from others were extremely powerful. We're going to talk about some of that work that you're doing today. But I think people are just resonating with your message because they're confused about the world, they're confused about their mind, they're confused about their body, they're confused about the struggles and the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. They want to learn how to simplify their life. They want to learn how to draw on their life, attract their desired future. They want to learn how to manifest better. They want to learn how to have a more peaceful, harmonious life. And they don't understand how to tap into the energy, the frequencies, the pharmaceutical healing powers within us, not outside of us, because we think it's all outside of us. And you talk about a lot of this. You have incredible best-selling books. We're going to talk about the documentary as well. But before we get into how, what, and why people can start accessing these things, can you share for people who maybe don't fully know your context of your story, how you even got into this, what you've discovered before and what you're starting to discover now in terms of this work in this space?
Sure. First of all, thank you
of course.
For all of that. I think I just was raised in a family where I had 2 parents that were, my mother was first generation Italian, my father was from Italy, and they were very family-based and they loved their children, and whatever interests that my brother and I had, they would fully support and endorse. And so I was a curious kid, but was also very Western, played, sports just like everybody. And then I read a book by Paramahansa Yogananda, and when I was 19 years old, Autobiography of a Yogi. And what intrigued me the most was I was raised in a very traditional Roman Catholic family, that there were other things happening that I was unaware of, these saints and these mystics in the book that had really powerful effects on reality, caused me to start thinking differently. And so I kind of got really super involved in yoga, super involved in martial arts. It was unpredictable for me to do anything like that, but somehow it piqued my interest. And then went through college, went through graduate school, moved to San Diego, and had a martial arts studio, had a yoga studio.
Really?
Yeah.
Were
And
you teaching yoga, or you just
yeah,
owned the
I was
studio?
teaching yoga in the 80s when people
on.
said that you were going to get possessed by yoga. Like I had challenges because nobody did yoga. So I had a yoga studio right in Pacific Beach in San Diego. And I also spent a lot of time studying hypnosis because I had roommates in college that were deep state somnambulists. They would sleep and talk to each other in their sleep the entire time.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. And I was running through a building in undergraduate school at Rutgers University. I was going to my organic chemistry class, and I saw this piece of, you remember, I don't know if you remember, but they used to hang papers like this and they would cut the bottoms with the phone
number? Yeah.
I saw it said, "Learn while you sleep." And I just ripped that tag off and I thought, I'm taking 21 credits that semester. I was taking a lot of credits. And I'm like, this could help me, and it was really about hypnosis. So I started reading about hypnosis while I was taking 21 credits because what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to class and not have to take any notes. I wanted to learn everything right in class so I didn't have to study, and that I could just replay the lecture by the end of the day, and I would remember as much as I could. So it required, a little bit of programming for that. Anyway, long story short, I took a good portion of my college loan and I went to a school that taught different levels of hypnosis, from hypnotist all the way to clinical hypnotherapist.
Really?
I put over 500 hours in studying it. And I started my own practice, and that's how I generated money to go to chiropractic college. And I started witnessing some pretty amazing changes in people, like right before my eyes. Like there was some power to the mind that I saw. The effects were taking place right in front of me, which of course piqued my interest again. I got decent at the fact that I didn't have to take any notes when I went to school, and ran a clinical practice. And then when I moved from Atlanta to San Diego to start my life after I'd graduated, I started doing triathlons, and that was kind of the hotbed where triathlons were.
San Diego, SoCal.
Yeah, Southern California. I sponsored all the 10K races in San Diego, and then I was in a triathlon. I got run over by a truck, and I broke 6 vertebrae in my spine, and the prognosis was pretty bad.
How old are you at this time now?
I was probably 24 years old. It was 1986, 24, 23 years old. And the typical surgical procedure for something like that is pretty radical. And I've talked about this on your show, but they wanted to put long rods in my spine, the length of my spine pretty much, because the 6 vertebrae were right in the middle of my spine, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12, and L1. And the top one had broken more than 60%, compressed more than 60%, and the neural arch was broken like a pretzel, So anyway, you drill the rods in and it cantilevers the spine, the spinal column off the spinal cord.
It's not much flexibility in that afterwards.
That was my big thing, right? Because we had 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons, and they were all saying surgery, surgery, surgery. In 1986, you really just didn't tell a doctor you weren't going to have surgery. In fact, they thought I had a head injury when I was saying I don't want to have the surgery. But I thought, listen, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. They're telling me I'm going to be paralyzed either way, so why don't I roll the dice, right? And just take a chance. There's a intelligence that's giving me life. Okay, it's a consciousness. It must be aware of me. And when you're conscious, you're aware. When you're aware, you're paying attention. When you're paying attention, you're present. So if it's a consciousness, it's present with me. So I got to get present with it. I got to give it a plan. I give it a design. I got to give it a very specific orders. And then I got to surrender because I can't do it. This intelligence knows how to heal way better than I do. Anyway, theoretically, it sounds really good, but I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I just kept going to the worst case scenario. I'm going to live in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Should I sell my practice? Should I sell my home? I'm never going to walk again, And I couldn't control my mind. And that was the part that really intrigued me the most because I read the book where the mystics were doing all these kind of incredible miracles and healings, and I witnessed some of the powers of the mind when I was doing hypnosis, and I knew I had to get beyond my analytical thinking mind to get into the operating system to make a change, and I couldn't control my mind, and it was a dark night of the soul for me because I kept going to the worst case scenario instead of the future that I wanted. And I think when we're pressed in stress or survival, you always prepare for the worst, right? There's better chances of survival. So for me, I couldn't control my mind, and that became the obsession. And it took me hours and hours. I have nothing else to do, really. It took me hours and hours and hours to really go through a process, and where I felt like I was complete enough and present enough that I gave it a good message. Because if my mind was wandering all over the place, I knew that the signal I was giving it wasn't clear.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, what I didn't know is that I was learning how to pay attention and be present, and I was also firing and wiring a whole new set of circuits in my brain that was creating a new level of mind. And then it got easier, and then what took me 3.5 hours to do, I was doing in 45 minutes. And then the outcomes started to produce changes in my body, sensory motor changes, pain levels in my back, everything was changing. I knew right in that moment that whatever I was doing inside of me was producing an effect outside of me. In other words, I was causing an effect.
You weren't taking in pills or medication?
No. There was not an option. They wanted to put me in a body cast. They came and fitted me for this full cast.
Man.
And they told me I had to wear it for a year.
Oh.
Anyway, long story short, it worked. And I was back on my feet in 12 weeks. 10 weeks, I was back in my life in 12 weeks doing everything I was doing before. And during that time, I just said, look, if I said to this intelligence, if I'm ever able to walk again, I'll spend the rest of my life. I promise studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. And kind of, for the most part, I've been doing that ever since. So anyway,
you're 23, 24 this time.
24, yeah.
And you essentially had a pact with consciousness, God, the universe, and said, if I'm healed, I will commit my life to this.
If this works, because I was educated, I knew a lot about the spine, and I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons that are telling me you're never going to walk again. And I'm talking to orthopedic surgeons that are telling me, you don't have much flexibility in your spine. And I'm thinking, you may not have any flexibility in your spine, but I have a whole lot more flexibility than you do, right? And so I had to weigh what I knew against what I didn't know. And I think that's really that moment. That's a dark night of the soul, right? Because you can't ask anybody their opinion because they're not you. And nobody gets you but you, because you're the one that has to make the choice, right? So I had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of lonely nights, and when I started noticing those changes, then my belief in what I was doing was just amplified by tenfold. In other words, I wasn't dreading doing it any longer. I was looking forward to doing it because I knew something was changing. All I needed was one thing. Just notice. As soon as I noticed that one thing changed, I'm like, okay, whatever I'm doing is starting to work. Now I had more ambition, more passion, more presence, more clarity, more intention. More creativity, and I was able to control my mind a lot better. So when I got back on my feet, I was like a different person. I mean, the homes and the cars and the money and all that stuff, it just wasn't as important to me any longer because I was like on my feet again. Like I just wanted to sit at the table with my buddies and have dinner. I just wanted to take a shower. I wanted to use the toilet. Like I wanted to watch the sunset. I mean, I wasn't taking anything for granted. Like if I duffed a shot on a golf course, I'd be like, who the hell cares? I was just different. And I couldn't go back to my same life any longer because I was not the same guy. I'd been initiated in a lot of ways. And I was taking information that was kind of theoretical and philosophical and really just speculating on, is it possible, right? And I just, when I produced those effects, I thought, oh my God, I can't go back to my life any longer. I'm a different person. So I moved to the Pacific Northwest. And I wondered for the longest time what happened to me. Like what exactly, if it happened, how did that happen? So there were no traditional textbooks that were talking about any of this. And I used to go to the University of Washington Library and sit there for hours trying to find information that would at least tell me, like, how it's possible that I could get vertebral height back after a compression fracture. Like, how is that possible? What is, if bones are made of proteins, how were genes signaled? If I changed my mind, how did I change my mind? If my mind did affect my body, how did my mind affect my body? And if I have to pay attention in order to do that, what is the process of paying attention? So I'd sold everything, and I bought a ranch, raised my kids out in the country, drank water out of the ground, had our gardens. It was just kind of a cool time. And I had a lot of time on my hands to think, a lot of time. So I was investigating all these ideas, and I couldn't find it in the traditional models. I found it more in neuroplasticity and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, what's that? Electromagnetism, quantum. I remember reading something that said you cannot explain a cut, the physiology of a cut, without a quantum understanding of reality. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because the mechanistic model says it's charges and then, it's molecules. It's not like that at all. It's something else. And so I embarked on this journey, and then I thought, God, are there other people that ever had similar experiences that I had that that healed their body in some way? And that's when I started studying spontaneous remissions. And so I traveled to over 17 different countries and interviewed people that were treating conventionally or unconventionally. They were staying the same or getting worse, and all of a sudden they got better. And I wanted to know what the cause was that produced that effect. Now,
of the spontaneous remission.
Of the spontaneous remission.
Or would that be called a healing?
Quantum healing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Like, they got better.
They got better. But
the prognosis was not good. They had terminal health condition, a chronic health condition, and then it went away.
And we didn't know why.
No one knew why. The doctors didn't know why. Nobody knew why, but I was curious, right? So
you went to all these countries and interviewed these people.
A lot of people, over hundreds and hundreds of people. And it was a lot just to create a way, a methodology to be able to gather these stories. Anyway, I was a Puritan at the time. I made my own Essene bread. I was vegan.
Really?
I was.
You had a garden, you were planting your own food, you were doing everything.
My whole life, I was always health-minded. I did yoga, I did martial arts. I thought you could heal anything with yoga. I thought diet was super important, vitamins, whatever. And I was looking for the commonalities, and that wasn't a commonality. And I was a Puritan at the time, and I was just like...
Those weren't a commonality.
They were not. Maybe
some people had
but
that.
It wasn't common.
It wasn't all.
No, but there were other common things that were more prominent than that.
Really?
And it was really interesting, because one of them was that the majority of the people believed that there was some intelligence within them that was beyond their senses, that they could not experience with their senses. They couldn't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it. But there was a power that was within them, whatever you want to call that, that was giving them life, and they thought that they could interact with it and connect with it. So I was curious, because I believed that as well, and that was a commonality. The second thing that was really fascinating was that they changed. They said, okay, if I have 6 months to live, if I only have a certain amount of time, if I actually healed tomorrow, how would I live? If I had another chance, how would I live? 'Cause I'm going to start living that way. Or if I only have 6 months to live, do I really want to be an attorney? No. I want to be an artist. And they just changed. And I think, it's really interesting, because I think when they understood that if they, on some level at the end, when they changed, they healed, right? So, and then I started studying the idea of the personality, right? Your personality, how you think, how you act, and how you feel. Keep thinking the same way, keep acting the same way, keep feeling the same way. Your personality is the same. Your body and your life is the same, and nothing changes in our life until we change, right? And so these people started, when they reached that lowest denominator, where the chemo wasn't working and the radiation wasn't working, the drug trial wasn't working, the surgeries didn't work and the diet didn't work, and the yoga didn't work, and the ayahuasca or whatever it was, the psilocybin, LSD didn't work. They still were dealing with their health condition. And there was a moment where they were like, nothing was making that feeling of emptiness go away. Nothing, that disturbance, that discomfort, nothing was making it go away. And I think when you're at that point, you can see yourself clearly through the eyes of someone else because you don't feel like you any longer, right? So you can pay attention to how you're thinking. You can notice, how you've been acting for the last 20 years, the choices you've been making. And you can look at the feelings that you've been feeling your entire life. And I think that is the moment we become conscious of our unconscious self, which is, for the most part, programmed to be 95% of who we are in terms of our attitudes, our beliefs, our perceptions, our unconscious habits and behaviors, and our kind of redundant and automatic emotional responses, right? So 95% is subconscious, right? So the first step is becoming conscious of the unconscious self, and that's not comfortable because you got to light a match in a dark place and you got to come up against yourself, right? And so on some level, they broke the habit of being themselves, and they realized that the emotions that they were living by really weren't loving to them. The anger, the resentment, they were just like, I can't hold on to this any longer. And I think the stronger the emotion we feel towards some past event or some circumstance in our life, the more we pay attention to it, right? And where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And you're managing your attention and energy to some person or some circumstance or some past event. You're giving your power away, right? So build your field, take your power back, take your attention off that person, overcome the emotion. You free your body from the past because the emotion really is just a record of the past. So I saw that the majority of the emotions that these people were living by, that they changed, were the emotions that were derived from the hormones of stress. And when you're living in stress, you're living in survival and anger and aggression and hatred and jealousy and envy and insecurity and fear and anxiety and worry and vigilance and hopelessness and powerlessness and guilt and shame and unworthiness. Entitlement, importance, control, competition, they're all derived really and driven by these hormones of stress. And so turns out that it's really hard to stop feeling those emotions because they're like an addiction. The arousal that's created from living in that emergency state consumes an enormous amount of the body's energy for some threat or some danger in the outer environment. And there's no energy in the inner environment for growth and repair. And the long-term effects of living in survival, and remember, stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. It's knocked out of balance. So the long-term effects of living in that chronic state of stress, the body's constantly in imbalance, and that imbalance becomes a new balance. Now the person's headed for disease because no organism can live in survival or emergency for an extended period of time. It'll consume all of its energy. There's no vital force for growth and repair, for long-term building projects. So I started really studying what stress does. And you could have the perfect diet and take all the vitamins and all the peptides and time it all. And you can do, high intensity training and fasting and yoga and massage and chiropractic and acupuncture. But if you're living in constant fear emotionally, and you're thinking about your problems, and your thought about your problems is turning on the same stress response as if you're being chased by a lion, or your reaction to a coworker is producing the same chemical change as if there were some threat in your environment. What was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive, because turning on that stress response and never giving the body a chance to turn it off, to bring it back into balance, is disease. So I discovered that people get addicted to the rush of these chemicals, and they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. And on some level, they become addicted to the life they don't even like, and that's why it's really hard to change. Because when you break an addiction, you go through cravings. And the addiction is when the body has been conditioned to be the mind, and it's looking for its familiar chemistry, for an arousal that takes away the whatever it is the person's feeling in terms of emptiness or whatever. So I got fascinated because if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the long-term effects downregulate genes and create disease, and our thoughts can make us sick. And I was like, oh my God, these people realized innately that when they forgave, what is forgiveness? When I discovered it was just overcoming the emotion. You just finish the emotion, and now you have wisdom, because the memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. And when you overcome the emotion, you no longer have your attention on that person or problem, and it's all okay, right? So free the body from the chains of the past, and it can become renewed again. And so it was very interesting to see that many of these people, without knowing it or not, stopped signaling the same genes in the same way when they overcame that emotional state. They were like, I hate my job. I hate my relationship. I'm going to just make choices. If I only have 6 months to live, I'm going to live happy. Like, I don't want to live unhappy.
I'm going to choose to live happy.
Choosing, right? And if you're choosing, you're changing. And if you're not choosing, you're not changing. If you're not changing, you're not choosing, right? So they made a choice, and the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And get ready the moment you do. You can intellectualize, but it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. You're stepping into the unknown. And if the addiction of those emotions, where the body's been conditioned to be the mind, the body starts telling the mind to return back to the known. Start tomorrow. You're a failure. It's your mother's fault. You were abused. I need a brain scan. There's something's wrong with you. This isn't right. All of the voices come up because the body's wanting you to think the same way, so you can make the same choice, so you can do the same thing, so you can create the same experience, so you can feel the same emotion, return back to that familiar place.
Why does the body want you to stay in a familiar place of fear and stress when it's not the most optimal place to be in this physical world?
I think it because the emotions cause us to see the future through the lens of the past, because the emotion is a record of the past. So you're always planning for the worst thing to happen when you're in that state. So the body has been conditioned to be the mind, the servant is the master, and the programs like, how do you open a doorknob? Well, you may not consciously remember, but you'd go, oh, you do it this way. Well, your body knows how to do it better than your conscious mind. That's 95% of who we are is those automatic behaviors, emotional responses. So epigenetics says the environment signals the gene. But the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So the body's so objective that when it's living in an emotional state, it's believing it's living the same past experience 24 hours a day. So not knowing it consciously, the person, when they surrendered the emotion, they overcame the emotion, they no longer signal the same genes in the same way. If they're no longer behaving the same way, there's behavior-dependent genes that are no longer a signal. There are experience-dependent genes. If you stop having the same experiences, you'll stop signaling those same genes. And genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So without knowing it, they changed. They became so conscious of their unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that they wouldn't go unconscious to them in their waking day. They knew that old self had to be retired. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? Really, that's the moment of change, right? So they went through that dark night of change and making a different choice and stepping into the unknown. And of course, the body wants to be in the familiar because we've been conditioned that the unknown is a dangerous place. I mean, you run from the unknown when you're living in survival. So taking a chance in the unknown, if you're living in stress and living in survival, goes against what's programmed in our biology in terms of survival. Cling to the known and wait for the threat or danger to go over. But for the most part, if the body's addicted to the emotion, it's going to be constantly obsessing about the worst case scenario in our life. So breaking the addiction, the body goes through cravings, and they went through those periods where they had a neurological, a biological, a chemical, a hormonal, and genetic death of the old self. They were no longer thinking the same thoughts that made the same chemicals that created the same feelings that signaled the same genes. They were no longer firing and wiring the same circuits. And so there was dissonance going on in the brain as the brain was breaking apart its circuitry and loosening up its connections. That dissonance is the body moving out of the known. It's a unpredictable order, right? It's novelty. So the body genetically and hormonally and chemically and neurologically is going through this kind of chaotic process. But one of the other things they did really well, which was the third thing, is they said, I got to reinvent myself. Like I can't be that same person. If I were to live my life, how would I think? How would I act if I had a new life with my ex, with my coworkers, with my kids, with my spouse? How would I behave differently if I'm not going to behave this way? Because this way is making me feel really bad and really unhappy. And no one's going to make me happy but me, okay? So how am I going to be and behave in my life? And then really the greatest part of it all was that they started thinking about, how do I want to feel? Like, I don't want to feel resentment and impatience and frustration any longer. I want to feel gratitude. I want to feel joy. I want to feel inspired. I want to be in love. These are the feelings I want to create. Can I teach my body emotionally what that future life looks like before it happens? And this was where it got really exciting for me, because they weren't visualizing their disease going away. They weren't doing their inward work to heal. They were doing their inward work to change. And when they changed, they healed, right?
Interesting.
So if a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again until it's hardwired in your brain's automatic, right? So their belief is that they can't heal. Could I install a new belief, and can I keep remembering that belief and keep firing and wiring? And if I keep firing and wiring, I'm going to install the hardware. If I keep doing it over and over again, after I'm firing and wiring new circuits and I have the hardware, well, the circuits fire easier the more I do it and become more like a software program. Could that be the new belief, the new voice in my head that says I can heal? Do I want to believe this or I want to believe this, right? So with intention and with attention, they kept reminding themselves what they did want to believe. In other words, they kept remembering to think that way. And if you keep doing it over and over again, of course, that's a belief. So
What do you, before you go on there, what do you think is the belief that holds most people back in the world?
Their belief in themselves. I mean,
Their lack of belief, or
the lack of belief in themselves. I mean, for you to truly believe in possibility, a new possibility, you better believe in yourself. And if you're going to believe in yourself, if you believe in yourself, you got to believe in a new possibility. You can't do one without the other. So again, going from the old self to the new self and changing that belief, you come up against that belief that says you can, it's too hard, you'll never change, nobody else has done this, whatever it is, right?
I've heard you say many times at your retreats, but also on here before, that your personal or your personality is your personal reality.
Right.
I think that's what you've said.
Yeah.
And so if I'm getting that right, your personality is your personal reality. And if your belief in self is limiting or limited and a lower frequency or doubting constantly, then that's going to become your personal reality, it sounds like.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of reasons to doubt in your life. And that's just it's a self-reflective universe.
Right.
But when they truly were, this is where we still see this currently today. It's not just doing it with your eyes closed. It's doing it with your eyes open, right? So then when they started saying, how am I going to be in my new life? And they started rehearsing in their mind, planning their behaviors, right?
Still got to live it.
Yeah. So, but them closing their eyes and saying, what would greatness look like today? What would love do today? How can I respond or act differently around this situation so that it's loving to me? What would be the greatest expression of myself? And they started to think about how they would behave. The act of rehearsing the behavior started to install circuits as well. They're priming their brain. They're putting the circuits in place to use. And if you keep doing it, it gets easier to behave that way. And then keep feeling the emotion, right, of their future, and stop feeling the other emotion, you're making different chemistry. Right. And if you're truly feeling the emotion and having the intention to behave that way, and having the intention to think that way, the stronger the emotion you feel, the more you remember to behave that way, the more you remember to think that way. And if you can memorize that emotion, the body's so objective that it believes it's living in a new environment. It doesn't know the difference between the real life experience that's creating the emotion the person's creating by thought alone. And in some level, they started to transition to this new person, and the side effect of their change They were sleeping better through the night. They started having less anxiety. They started noticing that their pain levels went away. They started to notice that they could eat more different foods, So they started to see the experiment working, like, oh my God. And I talked to some people. I remember talking to some people. They were like, yeah, my diagnosis was 20 years ago. Yeah, my diagnosis was 6 years ago. They told me I had a year to live,
Wow.
And like, I'm so happy. And yeah, it just went away. And, so I was mystified by that. And that kind of started the journey. And the last thing they had in common, which I found so fascinating, was something that I experienced as well. When they closed their eyes and decided who they no longer wanted to be, and they decided who they did want to be, and they were crossing that river of change, when they were doing that inward work, they lost track of space and time. They just, when they opened their eyes, they thought it would be 15 minutes later, and it was an hour and 15 minutes later, and they were like, I don't know what happened. And so then I started looking into research on what part of the brain really can make thought more real than anything else, and it's the frontal lobe. And I've read every researcher and every single research paper, every book on the frontal lobe, anybody that was a really great scientist. And frontal lobe is like a volume control. It's the creative center. It's when you have an idea, speculation, invention. When you're looking at possibility, it switches on, and it's the CEO, it's a symphony leader. And it's going to look out over the landscape of the entire brain and call up different circuits of knowledge and experience that you have and seamlessly piece them together.
Wow.
And when it does it and the nerve cells start firing in tandem, your brain creates a holographic image, a picture, and you're selecting a new possibility. And you're like, I can do that. That's possible. You're selecting a new possibility, right? That's the creative center. It's an unknown. And for the passionate person, that thought in their mind literally becomes the experience, and the end product of the experience is the emotion. So the person who's seeing that future and all of a sudden feels the empowerment, the success, the abundance, the gratitude from the healing, it's that thought and that feeling, it's that image and that emotion, it's that stimulus and that response that's conditioning the body to emotionally be in the future. Now think about this. If you're feeling the feelings of your future as if it's already happened, if your body is feeling the emotion of your future like it's already happened, you won't be looking for it. You only look for it when you feel like it hasn't happened. When it's already happened, you're no longer looking for it, which means you're no longer separate. And that's when people started having really powerful changes. So I started studying the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is like a volume control. And when it switches on and you assign meaning to an act, if I said, Lewis, if you did this, like whatever it is, if you did this, and I can tell you all the reasons, all the benefits, and I can give you the what and the why. And you go, I got it. And I showed you how. The moment you got the how, if you understood the what and the why, you would assign meaning to the task, and the frontal lobe switches on, and it wants the intentional outcome. It doesn't want a half an outcome, it wants the outcome, and it's going to keep doing it until it shortens the distance between the thought and the experience, right? So somehow, this frontal lobe would switch on and lower the volume, the circuits in the brain that cause you to process your body, to feel your body, to be aware of anything in your environment and what your environment made of, objects and people and bodies and things and places, and not be thinking about the future or the past. You're so locked in the present moment that space and time somehow change. And their inner world becomes more real than their outer world. And it was fascinating because when they came back on some level, they felt differently. So anyway, I wrote a book about it, called Evolve Your Brain, The Science of Changing Your Mind, in a very heady, very academic. And I think when you write your first book, you write to your biggest critics, right? and then there were some documentaries that came out, and people were starting to ask really important questions. Like the theory and the philosophy was really good, but people started saying to me, okay, if your thoughts have something to do with your future or your life, how do you do it? Like, how do you do it? And then the second question was, if my personality creates my personal reality and I got to change my personality to change my personal reality, why is it so hard to change? I mean, if most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, it doesn't work. So now how do I change so my life changes? And I thought, what a great question. And I saw that it wasn't as easy to change as we think, right?
Right.
You could say on Monday morning you're going to stop cursing and stop complaining.
Yeah, good luck.
And then by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're unconscious.
Son of a-
You're in defaulted back to the old self, right? And that's that. How many times do I have to forget and go unconscious till I stop forgetting and start remembering? I mean, if you want to be happy, really happy in your life, you got to stop complaining, because complaining doesn't make you feel happy. If you want to be happy, you can't judge another person, because the judgment is not going to make you feel happy. So you got to, that anything that's not loving you must die. You know, I mean, or a part of us must die that's not love, right?
Right.
And
Or
I think that's
must transform in some way.
in some way, but there is some death that goes
A
on.
letting go,
Yeah.
a death, a surrender.
And an addiction, you know, you break the addiction, right? So
Gosh.
anyway, so these documentaries came out. We're doing seminars around the world, and I was listening. I was on panels, and I was listening to these questions. And this was, you know, early 2000s, and I realized that there weren't a lot of people teaching how to do it, right? So I thought, okay, I'm going to start running these.
People were talking about it theoretically.
Right. It was all, you know, that's how it was at that time. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start teaching these events. I'll take everything that I've learned from the spontaneous remissions, everything that I've researched on neuroplasticity. I went back to school, studied neuroscience. I did brain imaging classes. I got really into it. And I thought, God, I'll teach these classes, you know, on a Friday night and all day Saturday workshop. I'll teach about brain waves. I'll teach about placebo. I'll teach about, you know, emotions and survival and stress, and, you know, give them people information. Then I'll give them something to do. And I think people came for the first couple of years, and they felt better at the end of a one-day workshop, but I didn't see any really big changes.
Right.
I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm done. You know, maybe it doesn't work. But everybody kept saying, can you teach another one? So then I would do another one, and then another one, and then I kept level 2, level 3, level 4, you know, it just kept going. And then I got to a point where I didn't know anything else. And then I had a mystical experience one morning right before the first day of this event that changed me, completely changed me.
What year is this? Roughly?
In 2011 or 2010. And I was like, oh my God, there's way more to reality than I thought. Like, there's way more. And so somewhere in the mix around this time, I started seeing people stepping out of wheelchairs with MS. Not once, not twice. I saw people with Parkinson's disease, with a lot of facial paralysis and tremors in a weekend workshop. Like, say, I don't have any tremors. I'm out of my wheelchair, and they're dancing around, and I think I was more surprised than anybody. Like, I was really super surprised what was taking place. I was witnessing something happening right before my eyes, and I kept saying, something's got to be, there must be an inner event that's going on there, that inside that person, that is so real, so transcendental, that it's changing their biology, and they're upregulating genes for health, and they're downregulating genes for disease, and something's going on in their brain, something's going on in their body. And so that's when I changed everything. That's when I said, okay, we're going to stop doing these weekend events, and we're going to do a 4-day event, you know, 1 evening and 4 full days, and we're going to do scientific measurements. We're going to measure brains before the event and brains after the event. And I wanted to see that the changes weren't just in their mind. I wanted to know that they were in their brains. So I brought a team of neuroscientists together. We did a lot of quantitative EEGs. And then I did something really interesting, and we started measuring brains in real time. So I could see their brains while the meditation was going on. And then if it requires a clear intention, that's a function of a coherent brain, and an elevated emotion, which is a function of the heart, okay? Let's see if we can change the brain and heart in really specific ways. So in the beginning, we partnered with Heart Math Institute, and we did a lot of analysis on HRV, and we wanted people to be able to sustain heart coherence, not just for 5 minutes, but for 45 minutes. I wanted it to become a skill.
What is heart coherence for people that don't know?
Okay, so I'll tell you what heart incoherence is first, and then I'll tell you what heart coherence is. So if you're living in stress and you're living in survival, and there's a physiological change in your body when you perceive a threat or a danger in your outer world, or you have the perception that something's going to get worse than that, automatic or autonomic system switches on, and there's an arousal that takes place, and there's a rush of adrenaline, and your heart rate starts to increase, and your respiratory rate starts to increase, and blood is sent to the extremities and away from the internal organs, and glucose is being mobilized, and you're getting a lot of energy to run, fight, or hide. But let's just say that you're on a Zoom call, and you're reacting to a coworker in the same way you would fight off a predator. And your heart is beating, but you're not exerting yourself, so the heart starts beating against the closed system. It's like pumping against restricted system.
Your body's not moving.
Right. And so you're not using that energy.
You're not transforming the
energy.
Right.
You're sitting there, you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time.
Ooh.
And the heart's beating against the closed system, and it starts beating very out of order, very erratically, and it starts losing its variability in terms of its beat. And when the heart gets incoherent, if you study any type of waves, when waves are incoherent and they interfere with each other, they cancel each other out. And when waves cancel each other out, energy drops. So energy leaves the heart when you're resentful, when you're impatient, when you're judgmental, when you're frustrated. No doubt about it, your heart's beating differently than when you're grateful, when you're appreciative, when you're kind, when you're caring, when you're loving, when you're inspired. The heart is moving out of survival, and we discovered that the heart is the creative center. And when energy moves into the heart, and you're breathing and you're converting your body out of that fight or flight nervous system, that sympathetic system, if you can convert it into the parasympathetic system, that nervous system of relaxation, the heart can come out. It's no longer living in survival or stress, and energy naturally moves into the heart, and the heart starts beating in this beautiful rhythm, like beating a drum or dropping a pebble after pebble after pebble in the water. And the heart starts to emit an external field, a magnetic field. But what we discovered that was even more exciting was that once energy drops into the heart, the heart, the creative center, resets the baseline for the emotional trauma in the past and tells the brain that the past is over. And that's the moment it sends a very strong signal to the brain, and the brain moves into a very creative state. Frontal lobe and the alpha brain waves are created, and now you're starting to see in images and pictures. The heart's telling the brain it's safe to create. And so getting the heart and the brain synchronized became this fascinating thing. And we discovered the more you relax into your heart, and we teach this, the formula is when you relax into your heart, the more relaxed you get into your heart, the more awake you get in your brain. Because the heart, like taking a big sheet and going like this, it sends a wave of energy to the brain, and the brain moves out of that aroused high beta brainwave state into a more creative state, right? A more alpha state, and you see in pictures and images. So keep relaxing into your heart. We discovered if you can sustain that, the brain moves into these complex patterns of order where waves are on waves are on waves are on waves, that delta is carrying theta, and theta is carrying alpha, and alpha is carrying beta, and beta is carrying high beta, and high beta is carrying gamma, and there's like harmonics of waves, and every single brainwave in the brain is harmonically in resonance. And gamma is super consciousness. So now you're relaxed in your heart, out of survival, out of stress, and the more relaxed into your heart, the more the brain goes into these elegant states of super awareness and super consciousness. So when you're living in stress and you're living in survival, stress for the most part is created when you can't control something, you can't predict something, or you have the perception that something in your life is going to get worse, and this alarm system switches on. And now what we try to do is we try to control and predict and manage everything in our life. So the arousal causes the brain to go into a super alert state. We become materialists, and we narrow our focus, we get over-focused, and we shift our attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place, to another meeting. And every one of those elements in your life is mapped neurologically as a neurological network in the brain. So shift your attention in an aroused state to one person, to another person, to another person, to another problem, to another thing, to another place, like a lightning storm in the clouds. the brain starts firing its compartments and its modules out of order. Measure the brain when it's like that, and it's really incoherent.
It's chaos.
It's chaos. And when the brain's incoherent, we're incoherent, right? When the brain's not working right, we're not working right. When we're in stress, then we become obsessive. When you're in stress, you're over-focusing. You're very narrow-focused, and you're over-focusing on whatever that issue or that problem is, and it's consuming all of your attention, right? So we discovered then, if we could teach people to go from that narrow focus, and because stress causes us to become materialists, if there's a predator behind the rock, you freeze and you narrow your focus on the cause, and you're looking at the material world. You're looking at matter. You're looking at the particle, because in survival, that's where your attention should be, on your body, on your environment, and on time. In other words, if T-Rex is chasing you, you better be thinking about your body. You better be thinking about where you're going to run in your environment, or what object or thing you can hide behind. Right. And you're going to be thinking about how much time it's going to take me to get from here to there, right?
You need to be in the 3D world.
You're immersed in the 3D world, and the senses are heightened because that's where the threat and the danger is. So all of our attention and energy goes in the 3D world, and now we're victims to however the 3D world plays out, right? And so we're matter trying to change matter on some level. When the brain is firing out of order like that, and the more incoherent it gets, the more incoherent or dysregulated the autonomic nervous system gets. And stress is autonomic dysregulation. So the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates all other systems. So your heart moves out of balance. You can have arrhythmias, tachycardia. Your digestive system is not a time to digest when you're living in stress and survival. So your digestive juices shut down. Your coordination of enzymatic release changes, your sensitivities to things, because your response to the environment is weakening the organism. Blood goes to the hindbrain and away from the forebrain, so you're more reactive. Your immune system dials way down because all the energy is going for the outer world. All the energy is going to the extremities and muscles, so you get tightness and soreness because you're not exerting yourself. It's not a time to procreate. It's not a time to make a baby. All those systems that require long-term projects are shut down. We discovered during this process, if we could teach people to do the exact opposite, to take their attention off of everything physical, off their body, off the people in their life, all the objects and things they own, all the places they need to go, the place they live, the place they sleep, the place they work, the place they're sitting, and if they're not thinking about the predictable future, the familiar past, to literally lose track of space and time and become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time. To literally take off all of your attention off of everything physical and material and go from a narrow focus, focusing on everything physical, everything known, to a broadened focus and an expansive focus, and focus on nothing. And the act of sensing space, for some reason, causes us to stop thinking and analyzing. And if you're not thinking and analyzing, you're slowing your brain waves down. And the act of sensing and not analyzing, and not thinking about your brother or your sister or your spouse or your fiance or your children or your coworkers. You're not thinking about your cell phone, your computer, your car. You're not thinking about where you need to sit, where you need to go. You're not thinking about what's going to happen next or what happened yesterday. There's this elegant moment where when you go from a somebody to a nobody, when you go from a someone to a no one, from something to nothing, from somewhere to nowhere, from sometime to nowhere, that's the moment you become pure consciousness, and that's the eye of the needle. And that's when you're no longer aware of the three-dimensional world because you have no attention on it. That's the moment you become pure consciousness, and that's the eye of the needle. So
and that's the goal that we want to get to. But for those watching or listening, they might be thinking, that sounds like the hardest thing to ever do.
Actually, it's not. It's actually,
Really?
let me tell you what it is.
Hey, before you share that, can you share, because I have this graphic from one of your books, can you share about, so people can understand, what is this material 3D world?
Okay.
Can you just kind of, where most people live in the 3D world. And before you get into that, there's a quote from one of your books that you said as well, that if an atom is 99.9999% energy and 0.00001% physical substance, then I'm actually more nothing than something.
More information, yeah.
More information than something, right?
And nothing too, yeah.
So why do I keep my attention on that small percentage of the physical world when I'm so much more? Is defining my present reality by what I perceive with my senses the biggest limitation I have? And I think this is from The Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah, so the probability that we're seeing the truth of reality is zero.
Wait, what does that mean? Say that again, and what does that mean?
The probability that you and I are perceiving all of reality is zero. We are looking at a small frequency of light. The spectrum of visible light, red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet, that rainbow of light, that's a small spectrum in the huge electromagnetic field, right? All those different frequencies. We got this small little bandwidth. Look in a physics book or any book or Google it, and you'll see the wavelength of light, this tiny little band in this huge number of frequencies there are in the universe. That small band of frequency, the light that's coming from the sun, the light that's coming from these lights, that light is bouncing off the most stable form of energy.
In this room, right?
Matter is the most stable form of energy, and it's fooling us into the illusion of separation. So now I'm consciousness, you're consciousness. How do I know I'm consciousness? Because I'm aware, right? But in the three-dimensional reality, right, I'm conscious, but what I'm conscious also is of me. And everything else that exists in three-dimensional reality, I'm conscious that I'm separate of. I'm separate from the cameras, I'm separate from you, I'm separate from this table. Everything that I'm perceiving with my senses in three-dimensional reality is fooling me into the illusion of separation. So in three-dimensional reality, our senses plug us into that reality. Take away your sight, take away your hearing, take away your smell, take away your taste, take away your feeling with your body. You would have no experience of three-dimensional reality, but yet it could still exist, but you're unaware of it. So then here I am local in space and time, and everything is height and depth and width, and that I'm into this illusion of separation. And in this realm of three-dimensional reality, there's an infinite amount of space. Space is eternal. In fact, it's accelerating, right? So the way we experience everything in three-dimensional reality is we do things. So if I want to go from here to my car to get something, I have the thought, I'm Joe Dispenza, I'm local in space and time, I'm separate from everyone and everything, I'm aware, and my awareness goes to my car. So now I have another point of awareness, another point of consciousness. I have a thought, and I want to have an experience. And the only way I'm going to have the experience in three-dimensional reality, as far as I know, to get to my car is I'm going to have to get up and move my body through space from one point of consciousness to another point of consciousness, from the cause to the effect, from the thought to the experience. And as I move through space, that's called time. So time is the separation between 2 points of consciousness. So everything that we create in this three-dimensional reality takes time, and it takes energy. So then there's you have a dream, you're aware that you're here, I'm local in space and time in this moment, and I want to have this dream of going on a vacation or making millions of dollars or getting a perfect partner, whatever that is, and your brain naturally puts that vision of your future and it estimates 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. Why? Because you got to save money, you got to sacrifice, you got to work extra hours, you got to cheat a little bit, you got to lie a little bit, you got to compete a little bit. If you're matter trying to change matter, and you want this experience in three-dimensional reality, it's going to take a lot of time and energy because your brain's going to say, I know you. It's going to take a lot of doing back and forth until you finally have the experience. And when you have the experience, the emotion that's created from the experience takes away the lack or separation from not having it. So in three-dimensional reality, we create from lack or separation. You see someone with a sports car, you see someone with a wardrobe, and you look at it and your brain automatically goes, I want that because I don't have it. So we create in three-dimensional reality based on lack. And so the brain has the image, I want one of those, it puts it in the future, and then we have to work really hard. And for matter trying to change matter, we force outcomes, we control outcomes, we try to predict outcomes, we compete for outcomes, because there's only a certain number of resources that we can do in three-dimensional reality to get what we want. you can get really good at it after a while. You can get trained, you can get educated, you can learn from your mistakes.
Yes.
And sooner or later, you'll be able to accumulate a lot of things that take away a lot of lack for a lot of people. But the question is then, does it make them happy, right? So,
Right.
So anyway, so
that's the 3D.
So that's the 3D world,
Yes.
right? So then you see the wardrobe and you see the sports car, your brain creates the image, you come back to three-dimensional reality and it's not there, and you think we can't create reality because it didn't appear, right? And so then our belief that we are creators in our life has to be changed, right? And the only way you can change that belief is through experience, because experience is the best professor. So you said, well, it's probably really hard to do that because we call that getting beyond yourself. Well, think about it. If you're living by the addiction of the hormones of stress and all of your attention is on your body, your environment, and time, and to change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time, then when you're addicted to the hormones of stress or you're living in stress, it's really hard to change.
That's hard to
It's
do.
really not a time to change. So we discovered, and we've looked at enough brain scans, that when you say, I can't do this, it's too hard, instead of you getting up and quitting and saying, I can't meditate, or this is not for me, that if you actually sit and you go past that thought, you're stepping into the unknown. If you catch yourself wandering to your cell phone or to your social media page or what your pet is doing or your spouse is doing, catch yourself, and you catch yourself doing that, going unconscious, and return back to the present moment, you'll get really good at catching yourself from going unconscious, and you'll start getting really conscious. And that you're bringing your attention back into the present moment, and that laboring for the present moment is the unknown. And so you teach a person how to do that, and sooner or later they get good at it. So when we were doing the events, and we were doing these 4-day events, we started measuring gene expression. We saw that people can change their gene expressions in 4 days. All good genes, for antioxidants, for stem cells, for immune regulation, for neurogenesis. We saw that they can lengthen their telomeres, they're change their biological age if they practice the work for 60 days. We saw that the majority of people at the end of 7 days, their brain was working better. We saw an enormous amount of change in anxiety and depression. How could you be anxious if you're not trying to predict the future anymore and you've mastered the moment, right? And so people were thinking that they were doing their meditations wrong when their mind wandered, but they're actually doing it right, because that's the process of being able to stay conscious and not go unconscious.
Come back to
right.
it, yeah.
We also discovered if I push a person past the point where they normally stop, where they say, I'm done, that's their comfort.
Yeah.
If I take them past that point, that's when the brain changes the most. That's when they have their biggest changes.
When they break through discomfort.
When they get to the point where they're uncomfortable, and instead of giving up and saying this is too uncomfortable, I can't meditate, if I give them something to do while they're doing that, and they can reorganize that dissonance and create coherence in their brain and heart, that free energy that's been created by keep lowering the volume to the emotion and taking the attention off the person. Their body wants to get up and do something and go, and you watch it wanting to be programmed to get up, and you bring it back to the present moment. You're training the animal, right? You're training the animal self, right?
Yeah.
And that's overcoming the body. And it takes an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of awareness to do it. And yet, like training any animal, sooner or later, when the body realizes it's no longer the mind, it surrenders.
Yes.
When that occurs, there's a huge liberation of energy, and energy naturally moves right into the heart. The body can relax into the unknown. The familiar past, when people are living by the same emotions every day, because they're recalling a memory from their past and they feel the emotion associated with it, they're in the familiar past. If they're predicting the future and thinking about all the people they have to see and the places they have to go and the things they have to do at the exact same time, that predictable future is the known, the familiar past is the known. The only place where the unknown exists is the present moment. So if the unknown is a scary place because it's been built into our biology, and you've got to go against thousands of years of conditioning and work with your body, I'm telling you, there's a moment where the body finally surrenders. Energy moves to the heart. Once it goes to the heart like a springboard, it's released right to the brain, the heart and the brain. The heart tells the brain to create, the forebrain switches on, and now the person starts thinking, there's got to be another way, there's a new way, right? And it resets the baseline emotionally in the body to tell the body the event is over. So we started doing these 4-day events and we were getting all these great changes. And then we started seeing something really crazy happen. In the middle of a meditation, when they were broadening their awareness and taking their attention off the particle, off matter, off everything known and physical and material in their world, off the 0.0001% of reality, and broadening their focus and putting it on nothing. That vacuum energy, that void, that oneness field, that unified field, that is undivided wholeness and order. If where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and you keep reminding the person that that nothing is filled with energy and frequency carries information. We discovered something really profound. When a person is putting more attention on that and less attention on them, when they're more aware of that and less aware of them, when they're feeling it, when they're experiencing it, when they're relaxing into it, when they're becoming nothing, all of a sudden, those different compartments of the brain that were once subdivided, that were compartmentalized and modulated and incoherent, started to synchronize, started to unify. We started to see more communities of neurons and bigger real estate in the brain start firing in tandem, right? And the brain started firing collectively, the entire brain in a global sense, to a rhythm. And that's wholeness, right?
And what's possible when we step into wholeness?
Well, here's what happens. We discovered then that you have to convert your brain waves. You got to go from that high beta state and sensing space and opening your awareness by not thinking. The purpose of meditation is to get beyond the analytical mind. Okay, so we said, okay, you got to go from beta to alpha, but that's not enough. Alpha is getting beyond the analytical mind, and now you're in the operating system where you can rewrite a program. But can you get a person relaxed in their heart and awaken their brain so their brain goes into theta? Now in theta, the neocortex, which plugs you into three-dimensional reality through your senses, the autobiographical self, the reflection of everything known in your environment, the repository of everything you've learned and experienced in your life, that brain goes into theta, lights are out in the personality. And you're not aware of your body, your environment, and time. And in theta, the brain waves are so slow that energy moves out of the thinking brain and drops right into the limbic brain, the seat of the autonomic nervous system. Now, when you're in theta, you're in a hypnotic state. And when you're in a hypnotic state, you're suggestible to information. And suggestibility is your ability to accept the information, believe in the information, surrender to the information without analyzing whether it's the truth or not. And that's exactly what programs the autonomic nervous system to make a pharmacy of chemicals equal to the information the person is receiving.
Wow.
So a hypnotist puts somebody in a state, they're in theta, and they can say, act like a chicken or whatever it is. And the person takes that suggestion all the way in and it changes their behavior, right? But the person's in a meditation. They're in a suggestible state, but their eyes are closed. There's music filling the space. They're not eating, they're not tasting, they're not smelling, they're not moving around, feeling with their body, but the door is open between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. There's only one other place where you can get information from, and that's frequency. And we discovered when the brain is in a state of coherence, in a state of order, and the person is dialing down the thinking brain, all of a sudden there becomes an entrainment between that invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses and the person's autonomic nervous system, which is like a tuning fork. And right on the top of the limbic brain, sitting right on top, is this little antenna called the pineal gland. And it has these little crystals in it that are very sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies. Dial down the thinking brain, open the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, energy falls back in the limbic brain. Teach a person how to stay relaxed, half asleep, let their body be asleep while they're awake. Tune into energy and frequency, get their brain entrained, get their heart entrained to coherence. Sooner or later, there's a read, there's a match. And the moment there's a match, and the energy is hitting that pineal gland, the entire limbic brain goes into these unbelievably high states of autonomic regulation. Now remember, stress is autonomic dysregulation.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about energy informing matter. And the autonomic nervous system is moving into such high states of coherence and such a fast frequency that every single cell in the person's body is being informed with new information. And the effect of that is a biological upgrade. Like, there's the eczema, now it's gone. There's a Parkinson's, now it's gone. There's a stage 4 cancer that was in the bones, that was in the organs, now it's gone. And there's the blindness, now the person's seeing. There's the muscular dystrophy, which is insane, and now the person's out of their wheelchair. There's the myasthenia gravis, now it's gone. There's a spinal cord injury, there's a stroke, the person's all of a sudden took a bite of wholeness, because that unifying field of energy, according to Bohm, is undivided wholeness. It's a frequency that exists faster than the speed of light, and E equals mc squared. So anything that's material or physical that's vibrating or traveling at the speed of light is going to turn into pure energy, disappear. And when it disappears, you move into that realm where everything's connected. Everything is more orderly, everything is more whole. So their interaction with wholeness is being reflected in their biology. So we started seeing these elegant states, and then we started doing 7-day events, because I was like, if this is happening in 4 days, why don't we go to 7 days? Now, we just did our 50th.
I saw that. That's
50th week-long.
It's incredible.
I know. I spent the year of my life.
Holy cow.
Week-long events. So we did 50 week-long events, and now a scientist and friend of mine who's a medical doctor and the researcher, PhD, super intelligent, very well-trained empirical scientist, comes to one of our week-long events in Cancun, and he sees someone on the stage that was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that metastasized to all of her organs in her body. And now all of a sudden she's on the stage. She was at an event 2 months earlier in Mallorca. Now she came to Cancun. She's on the stage, and she said, the doctors told me to go home and die. I tried everything. I tried all the drug trials, the chemos, diets there, and I had a moment. And when people make that connection, the arousal that's taking place in the nervous system is not like the arousal from stress. It's not fear. It's not pain. It's not anger or aggression. The arousal is ecstasy. Like, a person has a moment where they do not have the words to describe this unfamiliar, familiar feeling. It is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling. You forgot that you are wholeness. Like, you remember, oh, I came from here. Like, it's this kind of moment. And the connection is not the love you feel when you see your puppy. It's not the love you see.
It's a good kind of love.
That's a love. It's a kind of bonding, 3D chemical thing. This is electric. Yes. This is like where you feel an arousal, where you're connecting to some energy or frequency, and the arousal is bliss. The arousal is pure love. It's ecstasy. And this is the moment where the person's having an inner experience that is carrying an amplitude of energy that's greater than the betrayal, the shock, the diagnosis, the abuse, the rape, whatever it was. It brings the body literally out of the past right into the present moment. And the arousal comes with a release of brain chemistry that causes the person to have a very profound, transcendental inner experience where it's more real than anything they've ever experienced in their life. And experience enriches the brain. So now their brain is getting rewired to some mystical moment, and then a signal that's being traveled to the body that's lifting the body with energy and light. And all disease is a lowering of frequency, an incoherent frequency. The body's getting a dose of order. It's getting a dose of high regulation. It's getting a dose of wholeness. And the wholeness then is reflected. So this guy, who's a friend of mine, sees all of this, and he's a researcher, fellow at UC San Diego. And I went to breakfast, and he was like right in my face. And he runs 17 clinics in Southern California, and he's a brilliant dude. And he's like,
trial clinics, drug clinics, right?
He's a physician. He runs pain clinics.
Yeah, gotcha.
And for PTSD, and all other kinds of pain. And he was like, I don't know, like, we got to start doing research. I said, I've been doing research, monkey. He said, no, we got to do research. So that's when we partnered with UC San Diego, and that's when we started doing these 7-day events, and we've got probably the largest database in the world on meditation. So when we take the blood of those people who have that connection, there's information in their blood that was not present before the week-long event. There's chemistry in their blood that's being transformed from information on frequency. It's being transduced into chemistry that somehow reflects greater health and greater order. So when we started doing the research with UCSD, we saw that the scientists were, by the way, extremely dubious. They were very skeptical. They wouldn't even give me the handshake. They just thought I was kind of a crazy dude. But I said to them, okay, 90% of the people think their same thoughts every day. Same thoughts, same memories, same thoughts, same choices, same behaviors, same experiences, same feelings and emotions, same emotions influence very same thoughts. Biology has to stay the same.
Same outcomes.
Same outcomes. I give people new information. Really have it be information that's based in science. It's the contemporary language of mysticism. Have them learn that information, make it simple, but it's easier to forget it than it is to remember it. So you got to teach it back to a person next to you. You got to wire it in your brain. You got to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? Install the hardware. Nothing left to conjecture, nothing left to superstition, nothing left to dogma. Learn the information. You got new thoughts. To set up the conditions in the environment for people to apply it, to use it, to personalize it, make a different choice. Do something differently. Create some new experiences, feel new emotions. Will their biology change? And they were like, theoretically, yes. Well, they had no idea. After our first event we did with them, right before COVID, there were such dramatic changes in novice meditators that really never meditated before. They were just kind of like, my husband told me to come, my wife told me to come, my coworker, my sister told me to come. And then experienced meditators as well. And when we took the plasma from those advanced meditators and we started experimenting with it, like they closed the lab because COVID happened, and we put the spike protein, the COVID virus, the pseudovirus, in the presence of the plasma of an advanced meditator and did what's called an adoptive transfer, put an ACE receptor cell, a lung cell with an ACE receptor, that's where COVID usually enters. We saw that on an electron microscope, both exterior and interior, that somehow the plasma of people who had those transcendental moments that were experienced meditators, the virus couldn't enter the cell.
It was defending it.
The cell was greater than the environment. In other words, there was some mechanism that was causing those furry little spike proteins and viruses to stick to the outside of the cell. They couldn't get in. So then we did a bunch of experiments and we isolated a protein in the plasma of advanced meditators. That's information that was not there before the week long, but was there at the end of the week long without taking any exogenous substance. They're not ingesting anything, changing their diet, taking a drug. All of a sudden, their blood has this information that's causing their body to be greater than their environment. There's an immunity that's taking place. And we found this little protein, and proteins come from genes, and somehow novice meditators were upregulating thousands and thousands of metabolites in their blood at the end of 7 days to suggest that their body literally was living in a new environment, and they were in a ballroom. A ballroom looks like a big sound booth. There's nothing really stimulating in a ballroom. And without eating anything or taking any drugs or any pharmaceuticals or any vitamins or changing their diet or any therapies, their body was making a host of different chemicals and upregulating thousands of metabolites and genes to suggest that their body was literally living in a whole new life. When we take the plasma then of those people that have this kind of interaction with energy and frequency, and we put it in the presence of cancer cells, like a uterine cancer cell, the mitochondrial function in the cancer cell, and cancer cells love to move and multiply, and the mitochondria are the energy packets that cause them to do that. 70% of the mitochondrial function in the cancer cell, lights were out and took the energy out of the cancer cell. So we expanded the study to what percentage of people, if we did pancreatic cancer cell, if we did breast cancer cell, whatever we did one study where 84% of the people that were advanced meditators, 84% had the same effect on mitochondrial function. That's more than 8 out of 10 people, that's 4 to 5 people, somehow are producing this anti-carcinogenic chemical. Take the information in the blood, put it in the presence of an Alzheimer's gene that downregulates the gene for Alzheimer's. There's pro-life, pro-growth in there. Take the plasma of advanced meditators at the end of 7 days and look at their gene expression. Now, everybody in the 2,000 people or 2,200, 2,500 people at a week-long event has their own genotype, right? Yours is different than mine. If you're a different race, it's different. Everybody has their own genotype. But at the end of 7 days, 77% of the population is expressing the same genes and making the same proteins. In other words, the flock, the herd, the tribe, right? The school, the collective. There's an emergent consciousness when people behave the same way that's evolving their biology collectively for the better, for the good. And so we started seeing like people reporting pain levels dropping from their health conditions. So we did a study with 63 different health conditions, one intervention, meditation, 63 different health conditions. 100% of people reported a change in their energy, their fatigue, and their pain levels. So then we started looking, is the body making natural pain relievers? And so we started looking at endogenous opiates. 100% of the people at the end of 7 days were making their own endogenous opiates. In other words, they weren't taking morphine, they weren't taking Percocet, and yet their body was making their own endogenous chemicals that reduce pain in 63 different health conditions. There's no drug that you give for 63 different health conditions that take diseases that take away pain. So
is that the mind influencing the cell, or is that the heart influencing the mind to then transmit a pain relief? What is that?
Yeah, so I think there's great question. There's several factors involved. The heart produces opioids. And we practice sustaining heart coherence. We want to get so good at doing it with our eyes closed, we can do it with our eyes open, right? So
when you feel loved, you feel free.
Right, and not only free, but you're totally okay with everybody.
Yeah, I love everything. Yeah.
You see beauty. When you're in your heart, you see beauty, and our students' oxytocin levels sometimes are 200 times normal.
Wow.
That's not a little love. That's a lot of love. And at the same time, we have people whose amplitudes of heart coherence are 3 times higher, 200% higher than normal. That's not a little love. That's like your heart turning on like an engine of love.
Right.
Just like blood goes into the sexual organs, and when they're aroused and it's engorged, that's a consciousness, that's an intention, it's got a mind. Imagine that kind of intensity moving into your heart, and nitric oxide is released, and the blood moves into your heart, the arteries open up, and you feel this incredible amount of love, right? So there's endogenous opiates released from that when the brain is resonating in holism and resonance and coherence, and there's autonomic regulation, the body moves out of the past and the pain goes. So the side effect of all of this is natural opioids being created. We saw in our our fMRIs, we saw an area of the brain actually get larger in advanced meditators. And so we took the blood, and in the blood, there are factors in terms of information in the blood that causes nerve cells, we have the data, to go crazy and grow. Like there's factors in there that are pro-growth and pro-life. Take the plasma of a mother who's lactating, who's coming to our event, and we look at her breast milk, and we lacerate epithelial cells. And if you just lacerate epithelial cells and you let them go and you look at them 48 hours later, you may see a couple new cells growing in there. We took the breast milk of these women before they came to the week long. We put their breast milk in the presence of that laceration. Yeah, we saw some cells. There's some healing factors in the breast milk. When they went through 7 days and we put the breast milk on the lacerated cells, 48 hours of completely recovered.
It's like super milk.
Super milk. In other words, there's information in the milk that's pro-life.
Come on.
That's pro-growth.
That's
like
amazing.
Healing.
Wow.
And that's what's being transmitted to an infant whose mother is in an environment where she's in love. And love is wholeness, or whatever you want to call that. And so we brought in language specialists because there's a language of transformation. We're working with the University of Central Oklahoma. We got the world's leading language specialists on transformation. And we've studied hundreds of testimonials of people that have healed. and we're looking at the language that they talk about in their healing process. And we've discovered that when they have those big moments, there's a couple things that happen. They have a very strong feeling, and the first feeling they have is very somatic. And they'll say, like, it was like every atom in my body was vibrating.
Yeah.
I felt like my heart turned on like an engine. My heart exploded. My head blew off. I felt like my body was filled with light. Very somatic. And then the other part is very emotional. And the emotion is ineffable. Like, they don't have the language to describe whatever that was. And the reason I love this, Louis, more than anything else is because when you hit that, you stop looking for it outside of you. And you start realizing it's always been within you. And that's when the love affair begins, right?
Gosh, with yourself.
With yourself, with the divine. And it's always been with you. You want to hide the divine in a human being? Put it within them. They'll look everywhere else for it, right?
Right.
So very somatic, very emotional, and it's ineffable. But the only way that people can describe it is with metaphor. Because metaphor is like using what's known to understand an unknown, because in the circuitry of their brain, in three-dimensional reality, this is information that's coming from beyond three-dimensional reality. There's no language for that. There's a language for everything that you know. So the only thing you can do is you can try to explain an unknown by using lots of knowns. And that's kind of a Hebbian law. Get enough circuits firing. If I said, receptor sites look like craters on the moon, but they're not craters. They're more like flowers. When flowers have antennas, in the center is a kaleidoscope, and the chemical fits in like a lock and key and turns a kaleidoscope. But like dropping a pebble in the water, the antenna gets the signal, and the DNA unzips like unzipping a zipper. So you're using all these metaphors to help someone understand something unknown called a receptor site, right? So when people have these transcendental experiences with energy and information beyond their senses, they don't have the language to describe, like it's, and the language specialist came to the event in, Jeff, he's such a great guy. He came to the event in Marco Island in September of last year, and he had a moment. He had a big moment. In fact, it was so big, he wanted to get on a Zoom call with me, and we were laughing so hard because he's a language specialist.
He couldn't explain it.
He did not have the language to explain what happened. So, check the microbiome out. We started looking at the microbiome, and I'll stop here because I can go on. We look at the microbiome. Now, you know this. You're a health-minded guy. You want to change the microbiome? Okay. Stop eating sugar. Stop eating starch. No alcohol. Don't eat too late.
Smoking.
No smoking. Take your probiotics. All of that. And maybe in 6 months, you may see a few different, like a phylum of microbiomes changing. At the end of 7 days, there are such dramatic changes in the microbiome that our AI, our computers that have algorithms to predict diseases, say diseases like anxiety or cancer or PTSD. The machine learns when a person has PTSD, there's a very specific microbiome they have, very similar for cancer, very similar for PTSD. Okay, so you can predict more than 70, 80%, 90% when a person has a health condition by looking at their microbiome. At the end of 7 days, the AI, the machine learning couldn't predict it. The algorithm couldn't predict it at all. It couldn't tell if the person had the cancer any longer. And there were so many probiotic microorganisms that were upregulated for inflammation, to reduce cancer, for cancer response to treatment. 7 days? Wow. 7 days. And I said to one of our research team, well, what do you think it is? And one of the researchers said, I don't know. And the other researcher looked at me and he said, they're not the same person. If they were the same person, they'd have the same microbiome. And in 7 days, they're a different person, different microbiome. But the microbiomes that are being created, the competition for healthy microbiomes are squashing the microbiomes that control a lot of diabetes and inflammation and cancers. And so we showed this data to one of our neuroscientists on the team, and she was like, excuse me, like, she couldn't even compute how all of these changes would have such a dramatic effect on the microbiome. So I want to be very clear that, number one, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that meditation somehow has an effect on the COVID virus or on cancer regulation. I'm not saying that. The data's saying that. And I keep telling the scientists, I can't believe this is the truth. I can't believe it. And when you see a scientist running a study, 5 times over and over again, I love it.
Trying to disprove.
They're changing their belief right in the moment. Like there's, a drug study at its best is about 25% effective, like 1 out of 4 people. 25%.
We'll see some type of change.
You'll see some type of change. And it's usually an intervention that takes place over a period of time. Our data is 75 to 100%.
Wow.
Their nervous system is manufacturing a pharmacy of chemicals that work better than any drug. And now, after all these years, I can sit back and say, you can't call this pseudoscience any longer. You can't call it pseudoscience. And I think when we have great testimonials, stories of transformation. I was just telling you before we started.
Yeah.
Every event I go to, somebody stands on the stage and blows my mind. Like we had 3 events, one in Basel, one in Barcelona, and then one in Cancun. At every event, someone stood on the stage and just told a story, and I was shaking my head. A tumor that's 9.5 inches in size on a kidney, that's metastasized all through his organs, causing his lungs to swell with fluid. Can't do the surgery. I mean, he's in rough shape. 8 months. 8 months. He never missed a day. He goes to the doctor, there's nothing there. Nothing there. Like, I don't know, like, we have such great stories like that all the time. And blind people seeing like that, that's kind of weird. 5 people stepping out of a wheelchair, a 1 week-long event. I'm like mystified by that.
Wow.
So we have great evidence in human testimony. When someone stands on the stage and they have a 4-minute mile that broke through a certain level of consciousness or unconsciousness, somebody in the audience is invariably looking at them with the same health condition and going, she doesn't look vegan. She doesn't look very buffed. She doesn't look very young. She's not very stylish, but she healed herself.
Wow.
And what she's speaking is the truth. She is the example of truth. And in a moment, the consciousness of the collective changes because they become aware. Consciousness is awareness of a possibility that they were unaware of. Big footprint in consciousness in the field, and then evidence in 3-dimensional reality. Balance that with the evidence that we have that's overwhelming in the scientific studies that we can do, and I can go on for another 2 hours about all the studies. Evidence in science, in research, and evidence in human testimony, evidence is a loudest voice. And I think that's what changes consciousness. I think that's what changes a collective consciousness. So there is a field of intelligence that exists beyond our senses that we're unaware of. And that unifying field of energy, it makes up more of the universe than the physical universe you and I are living in. And so then can you teach a person to get beyond their senses, to get beyond their body, to get beyond all the people and objects and things and places in their environment, to stop trying to predict the future and stop emotionally revisiting the past and labor for the present moment and become pure consciousness. If you can teach people the right information and then set up the conditions in the environment for them to experience it, the first couple of days will be choppy because it takes an enormous amount for David to face Goliath. And you got to get right up against every one of those thoughts. There are the thoughts that are always slipping by people's awareness, that talk them out of possibility. And I think when people do that, they get in the habit of stopping to believe in themselves. They get in the habit of quitting. They get in the habit of absolving their effort and using some excuse to do that. 7-day immersion, where you go all in, you start early in the morning, you go late at night, is information transformation. It's information transformation. We build information transformation. Stand as it, walk as it, sit as it, lie down as it, become it. Right? So the overcoming process we've discovered is the becoming process. And that 95% that's unconscious, you have to face off with and you got to finish it. So the thought doesn't slip by your awareness unnoticed by you when you return back into your life, where your emotional response to the same person or same circumstance causes you to no longer see the vision of your future because you're feeling the emotions of your past. You'll believe in your past more than you'll believe in your future, right? And so when we started doing all these case history studies and really looking at people's stories, it was so obvious that they were doing exactly what the people that how their spontaneous remissions were doing. They weren't doing their meditations to heal. That's not why they were doing them. They were doing their meditations to change.
Right.
And they were surrendering any aspect of their limited self to join the greater self, to lose the sense of self, separation to nothing. And that nothing turns out to be rich in something, and energy and frequency carries information. And so interacting with that energy and frequency with coherence in your nervous system begins to be translated into our biology as a reflection of wholeness. And we see it across the board over and over again. So when a person then becomes nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time, and they're in that void, in that vacuum, in that nothing, if you teach them to pay more attention to it and put more awareness on it and feel their connection to it, not only is their nervous system going to get highly organized and highly entrained, but when they connect to it and that little radio receiver at the top of the limbic brain, the pineal gland, that little radio receiver starts to transduce information into chemistry in the brain, that's when the person has that full-on sensory experience beyond their senses, and now they're in that 5D reality. And in 5D, it's all energy, it's all frequency, it's all connected, there's no separation. It's all consciousness, it's all vibration. There's nowhere to go, you're everywhere all at once. There's no separation because there's nothing to be separated from. So training people over time with information to understand that when they get to the field, if they're going to create from the field instead of from matter, like if you're creating from matter to matter, it's just going to take you a long time.
Right.
But the idea then with brain and heart coherence, brain coherence, clear intention, electrical charge in the quantum field, send the signal out. We talked about this last time. Elevated emotion, heart emotion, magnetic field, coherent heart, that's what draws the experience to you, right? If you create from the field instead of from matter, and it's not matter that's creating the field, it's the field that's creating matter, get as close to source as you can, get it close to singularity, to that 0 point field, oneness, wholeness, whatever you want to call that, and there's less separation between your consciousness and the consciousness of pure consciousness. If there's less separation between 2 points of consciousness, there's less time. You create from the field instead of from matter. You could actually shorten the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it. And the cool part about it is when you get your nervous system tuned and there's a vibrational match and you're creating from source, why would you go anywhere to get it? Well, if you were source, you wouldn't go anywhere to get it. You would draw it to you. And you collapse time and space. And when you do that, then the synchronicities, the serendipities, the coincidences, the opportunities start to prove to you that you're actually the creator of your life instead of the victim of your life. And so then people do the work, not because they have to. They do the work because they don't want the magic to end. I mean, every time I go into nothing, I go into nothing with the understanding that it's not nothing. I saw the data. The scientists do meditation. I ask them, why do you do meditation? They say, because it's medicine. This is medicine. Like yes. I do the work because I'm the grad student running the trial here. I saw what it did. I'm doing it with the intention of changing my biology.
Yes.
And the other thing I discovered when people give their testimonials is when they do their meditation sometimes 3 times a day. And 3 times a day. Why 3 times a day? Well, that's because they're all the other things they've been doing in conventional and unconventional things aren't working. And the only thing that can work is their belief in themselves. Mm-hmm. So when they default and they respond and react and start doubting, and they start feeling the emotions of their past, they can't believe in their future any longer. So they got to sit down and change that. And when it's the hardest, it matters the most.
That's when you got to do it.
That's when it matters the most, because anything after that point is easy. So they're doing their meditations 3 times in one day to keep changing their emotional state. Because when you feel the elevated emotion, you can believe in that future because that emotion connects you to that future. So it would be really prudent to get really good at sustaining heart coherence with your eyes open. No person, no circumstance, no condition move you from the state, right? That's the initiation, right? So some of these people would have changes in their health, by doing their meditation every day. but their blood values and their scans weren't changing. And they're like, okay, wait a second. I'm not going to say this isn't working because I'm sleeping better and I have less pain and I have my appetite back and, I feel better. I have more energy, but my cancer's still there. And what am I missing? What's my blind spot? Oh my God. When I see this person and I go to here and I go there and I do this, I default. I had seamlessly default back to the old person. So they're actually doing their meditations to make sure that they can sustain that state, and they start rehearsing. 1 hour of a good meditation against 15 hours in my day where I'm stressed out and fearful and anxious, I'm signaling the wrong genes here. My body can't go back into homeostasis. I'm out of homeostasis. Okay. This isn't loving to me, justified, valid or not. Me holding a grudge against that person, it's only killing me. I'm drinking the poison, hoping they're going to die. So they're like, oh my God, this is more loving to me to feel this way. So now the walking meditations that we do become very instrumental because you got to walk as it. You got to walk as it in your life. Like you got to walk as it in your life. You got to believe it, behave, and become. Believe, behave, become. That's the mantra.
And really practicing it is what will allow you to become it more frequently.
Exactly. Until you actually become it.
Yes.
And so learning how to do it with your eyes open, and when you lose it, when nothing else is working, they would do their meditations to change their belief over and over again, and they had to make a decision to change their energy, to signal their body that they could believe. And the stronger the emotion, the more they remember the belief. And so we've uncovered a lot of little singular mysteries that add up to a bigger understanding about how to make this brain and heart of ours work better and to begin to become coherent brain, coherent heart. You got a Wi-Fi signal. You got a Wi-Fi signal, you can connect to energy, you can connect to information. Dissonance, incoherence in the brain, incoherence in the you got no signal. You got static on the wire. You got nothing. You can't connect.
Yes.
So getting people into this state where they get their nervous system regulating back into order causes them to begin to become more open to that invisible field of energy where nothing's local in space and time. It's all energy, it's all frequency.
And if you're able to share a little bit, kind of, when I went to your event, you had this up on, something similar like this up on the board at one point when you were teaching. And this is in one of your books as well. It's going from thought to energy to matter. And can you explain a little bit more about what this is? I'm going to have it up on the screen for people to see it when you're talking about it. But there's different frequencies.
Yeah, I read a physics book where this physics professor was talking about the fertile void, the vacuum energy. And he said that the vacuum energy, number one, the void, was pure consciousness. I remember reading that and throwing the book down and saying, what is pure consciousness? I had to really think about it. Pure consciousness is a consciousness that is conscious of everybody, everyone, everything, everywhere, and every time, past, present, and future. So this is that kind of unified field, this universal mind. And at the top is a straight line, and that straight line represents a frequency that is absolute speed, the fastest frequency, and absolute rest in a non-vibrating state, right?
Zero vibration.
Zero vibration, so fast. The wave is so fast that the point of absolute speed and point of absolute rest merge. And now you're everywhere all at once. You can't go anywhere because you're everywhere, right? So it's a kind of a crazy concept, okay? He said it was pure consciousness, and he said in it lies all potential realities in their non-manifest, immaterial, intangible form. And he said in order for matter to appear in this void, in this vacuum, a vibratory sensation must be set into motion in the void. And what's a vibration in the quantum? A thought. It's a disturbance, right? All right, so look at that flat line. If you start lowering frequencies down, you keep lowering frequencies down, you keep lowering frequencies down, you get to the lowest frequency down here, and that lowest frequency down here at the very bottom is called matter. The slowest frequency that we perceive with our senses. So every single person Every soul has come from source, from singularity, from oneness, from wholeness, and we descended all the way down into density, into three-dimensional reality, fooled by our senses that this is the only reality there is. And so much of our attention is on our bodies, on the people in our life, on the things we own and the places we live, the places we live, the places we need to be, the places we need to go, and time itself, that we create this identity that's identifying with three-dimensional reality, and we have no awareness of where we've come from. Throw in the hormones of stress and activate the senses, and now you're really your body, now you're really your environment, that's where all your attention is, you're really obsessed with time, and now you got to play by the rules of Newtonian physics, and now everything is predictable, everything is known, everything you got to plan to make happen in three-dimensional reality. So then vibration, think of a pendulum. Take a pendulum, you got that point at the top, and swing a pendulum, and anything that vibrates, anything that oscillates, moves between 2 points of rest, 2 poles. And at the point where it goes at one point and it stops, that is the point of absolute rest, that is no time. At the point where it's at the very bottom, right from the point, right straight down, perpendicular, vertical, that point right there is when it's moving at its absolute speed. Then it's got to go uphill, and then it stops, and now you're at a point of absolute rest. So this oscillation that's created is called a frequency, right? And if you were to measure that mathematically, it's a sine wave. And at the very top of, say, the sine wave, the peak, that's the point of absolute rest. As it moves down and it's moving down, that right in the middle is the point of absolute speed, and then it goes to the point of absolute rest. Now, absolute rest is no time. Source energy, there's no space and there's no time. There's no separation. So then the slowest frequency then, in that point where it starts oscillating, you can see the slower frequencies are touching source a lot less. As the frequencies get faster, as the points of absolute speed and the points of absolute rest get closer and closer together, you're touching source more because you're touching no time more.
Interesting.
So now you feel more whole, you feel more love, you feel more freedom, you feel more faster frequencies, more bliss, more wholeness because there's less separation.
Interesting.
So now the fastest frequencies, Planck constant, the frequency is so fast, take a centimeter of this frequency and there's enough energy to create the entire universe.
Wow.
That's how much energy is in there, okay?
Wow.
So you get to a point where the points of absolute speed and the points of absolute rest merge. That point, that non-vibratory state, has an infinite number of potentials and an enormous amount of power. It is the source of everything physical and material, right? So then energy slows down, and as it slows down, it has its own characteristics, and it reaches a point where it can no longer be whole. When it reaches a point where it no longer can be whole, it divides, it separates, it bursts, and now you have light and photons and electrons and positive charge and negative charge and past and future and sound, and the frequency slows all the way down into density, right? So then our job then is to take all of our attention off our body, off our environment and time, and really move to a place where we're conscious of nothing but you as an awareness. And when you do that, that point of where you become pure consciousness is the door to the quantum field.
Wow.
That's where we start interacting with different energies and frequencies. So we use this model to help people understand that the closer you get to source, if you're vibrating at this frequency as pure consciousness and you're creating from here, there's less separation between you as your individual consciousness and oneness. If there's less separation between 2 points of consciousness and you're creating from the field, it should appear in three-dimensional reality in a shorter amount of time. Down here, there's a lot of separation. It's just going to take you a long time to create what you want, right? So getting beyond yourself and becoming pure consciousness, there's a whole unlearning process that has to go on. Why? Because we're still programmed to believe when we're in that void or in that vacuum, in that nothing, in the emptiness, we actually believe there's Louis or Joe Dispenza, I'm here, and then there's the vacuum and the void here, and you still believe you're separate. And that is a whole unlearning process that has to go on to realize that you're a thought, you're an awareness there. And in that state, if you're truly there, aware of nothing but you, And if you're creating from that place, your thought actually produces a frequency. And if you can feel the frequency of the thought, in other words, the thought of your abundance in the 5D reality produces the feeling of abundance,
Yes.
of worthiness. Your thought of your wealth in 3-dimensional reality produces the feeling of lack of not having it. So when we create from the field, we have to create from the state where we feel the feeling of the event before it occurs. In the quantum, you have to feel it first to experience it in 3-dimensional reality. So change the information in the field, you change the hologram. This is all a hologram. You're going to change the projection in 3-dimensional reality. So we teach people how to practice with brain and heart coherence to change more information in the field, keep changing the information in the field, get closer and closer to source. This is the greater mind. You don't have to worry about when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen or try to predict it. It's none of your business.
Right. And you already feel good too.
Yeah, you're creating from wholeness.
Right.
You're creating from wholeness instead of from lack. And so when you start synchronizing your energy in the proper way, and you keep inputting into the field, then you start seeing the synchronicities in your life. You know, I'm not talking about a parking space. I'm talking about like opportunities. Like, and you're like, well, whatever I just did this morning, I'm going back tomorrow. I'm doing it again because I believe now that I'm the creator, and that is what actually enhances the outcome, right? So people in this work, they do the work because they don't want the magic to end. Right? Experimenting, creating from the field instead of from matter to shorten the distance, the time between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it when we create from the field instead of from matter. And so you got to get to the field first. And you got to get to the field, and you can't go as a somebody.
Yeah.
You got to go as a nobody. And I think I've labored for years to get people to get beyond themselves. And that's the work. You know, that's really the work.
I always love when you come on because I can just sit here and watch and listen for hours. And I think what you just shared right there is going to be extremely helpful for people. You know, we're going to have this up while you were sharing for them to visually understand this, because I think it can get complex trying to conceptualize these things. Again, you said we need metaphors to explain these things so people can start to feel and understand and say, okay, well, maybe I could get there. When we're in so much stress, so much of feelings of lack, so much feeling of anxiety, confusion, overwhelm, not enoughness, and a deep sense of insecurity and self-doubt. It feels like it can be almost impossible to start even thinking about these things, let alone spending 5 minutes trying to meditate, let alone starting to believe in a potential future. And so I appreciate the way you explaining it and showing visually kind of like, okay,
there's a caveat to that too.
Yes.
The caveat is you got to pass through the valley of the shadow of darkness. Because every one of those lower frequencies is carrying information. Every one of those emotions have memories.
Loss, pain, victimization, suffering.
Some people stop and they say, oh,
it's too much.
It's too much. I feel this suffering because of my childhood, because of my past. And that's where they stay. So the job then, when you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time, is you got to go like, is there anything beyond this guilt? I've been feeling this feeling so long, suffering, I didn't even know I just was suffering. It's just how I always feel.
It's all I knew.
So you got to pass through those different emotions. You got to go through one by one. And listen, it's so important because when you're not reaching for your cell phone, and you're not turning on your computer or the TV to watch the game or going shopping or calling a friend, you sit with yourself, right? And I want everybody to come up against themselves. I mean, if not now, when?
It's true.
If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And yet, the logjam somehow has been removed. And now we're seeing people, my staff just showed me yesterday, we have well over 800 different testimonials. Those are just the ones that people are willing to give. I mean, I get stopped in the elevator all the time. I get texts all the time of people healing. The ones that are willing to do the testimonials, we have over 800 testimonials. You know, it was once, it's an incident, it's twice, it's a coincidence, 3 times, I don't know.
800.
800 is
Who knows?
something's happening here. You
Yeah.
know, there's a lot.
But also you have, I mean, your documentary or the movie that just came out, The Source, is extremely insightful and eye-opening because you have the scientists who are speaking the entire time about their disbelief, that they've tried to discredit or, find somewhere that there's something happening, and essentially over many years of research, of scientific data, and of them being students of the data and of the practice, them seeing personal transformations and healings that are, they can't explain because they're not taking drugs, and also seeing thousands and thousands of data points transform within 7 days, over and over and over again after, I don't know, how many different events have they studied now? Probably dozens, seeing similar transformations of cells healing is very powerful. And we're gonna play a trailer here in a moment. We'll put it up on the screen for you guys to watch, a 1-minute trailer, so you can see exactly what this movie is going to be sharing about. And if you have any type of, you're not sure about this still, or maybe this is all kind of, you're just new to this, or you're still kind of learning this, watch this trailer, and I recommend to check out on how you can go watch the full movie as well, to see the research, to see the data, and some of these testimonials that are, it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain. And I've been at your event. I've been there for 7 days. I've experienced transformations over my own self over the last 4 or 5 years of doing your meditations in the morning or evening. And also I witnessed a lot of people in person get out of wheelchairs. A lot of people that were trembling before that were steady after. People do incredible things in a week. Yeah. And it's because they started the process of letting go of their old self and becoming a new self. These 4 things that you talked about. 1, they've got to have a belief in a different intelligence, or some type of intelligence, a greater intelligence than what they're living.
That's within them.
That's within them. The second thing I think you said is, and they've got to get beyond the senses, know that there's power beyond their senses right now.
Yeah, because the field you can't see.
You can't see it.
Yeah.
Then they started to change their behavior.
They changed they broke the habit of being themselves.
Yes.
Their thoughts, behaviors, and emotional states.
Yes. Then they start to say, okay, I'm going to reinvent myself. And by doing it from a place of, how do I want to feel?
How do I want to think? How do I want to act? How do I want to feel?
Yes. And then the 4th thing I think you said is they lost track of space and time.
Look, there's nothing that you said that's so outside of a beginner's mind to accept this. I mean, who's beating your heart? Who's digesting your food? Who's running all those automatic functions? Something's giving you life. And it's pretty intelligent. I mean, you have little tiny enzymes zipping through the trillions and trillions of cells of your body and changing mutations. You're not thinking about that. There's an intelligence that's giving you life. And if it is an intelligence, then it is a consciousness, right? So just acknowledging that it's within you is enough. Everybody has done something great in their life at least once. I don't care what it is. You just got a wild ass idea and you saw this possibility and you got so wrapped up in the possibility that it could happen to you that you started feeling the emotion. You were giving your body a taste of the future when you felt that emotion, and no person, no circumstance, no in-law, no relative, no friend is going to talk you out. No pain, nothing, no excuse is going to talk you out of that future. You felt it. Everybody's done that. They married a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and then they said, okay, what choices am I going to start making? I'm going to write them down. What things am I going to start doing? What are my goals? What are my experiences I want? And every goal you wrote down, you thought, oh my God, it's going to feel like this. You got really clear, and you just kept reviewing all the things you needed to do, right? And how you had to choose, and how you wanted to think, and what you did want to believe. And you took time to keeping it alive, right? And it's so much easier to forget it than to remember. So you got to revisit it over and over again. And then we all did this. I'm too tired. I'll start tomorrow. I don't feel good. That's not going to be in my wheelhouse. That's that's me not changing and me not choosing. Okay, so What choices am I going to stop making? I'm going to get off the couch. I'm not going to scroll for an hour. I'm going to get out of bed early. You know, these are things I'm going to not sleep in. I'm not going to do this, whatever it is. What things am I going to stop doing? What habits am I going to break? Okay, I can't keep doing the same thing. I got to do different things. What experiences am I going to stay away from with certain people in certain parts of my life? I'm just not going to, I don't want to go there. Like, I need to disconnect from those experiences. And what feelings are going to bring me to a lower denominator that's going to cause me to feel like my old self and not believe in my future? We did this, you know, everybody's done it. And then you stick with it and you're believing in it and your energy's changed and you're excited. Nobody knows what's up with you, but you're excited about something. And it's like your little private little creation that you're nurturing. And then when you start seeing the things change and it's working, right? And then you start taking your foot off the gas a little bit. And now you start believing a little bit more and you ease up. And when it happens, you feel more whole and you feel more joyful and you feel more giving and more loving and more present and more patient. That's the side effect of us, reaching that vision of our future. And if your vision is to be wealthy, if your vision is to be in love, if your vision is to be, I don't know, whatever it is, to have a mystical experience, and you're here, I tell my kids this from the time they were little, you cannot be wealthy if you want to be wealthy if you're this person. You're going to have to do a lot of changing to arrive there. You can't be that person. If you want to be healthy and you're not healthy, or you're out of shape, or you're overweight or underweight or whatever it is, if you want to arrive at that goal, you're going to have to make a lot of different choices, do a lot of different things, create a lot of different experiences, and feel very differently than when you started.
Yes.
And when you finally change, we're going to arrive right at that vision. So we were talking to the language specialists. We had 15 scientists in San Diego a couple months ago, and all of the people that are deeply engaged in it. And I want to make this really practical for people. There's personality and personal reality. Change your personality, change your personal reality. Meditation means to become familiar with. Become familiar with the old self. Know thyself so well that you don't go there any longer. But become familiar with a new self. Fire and wire new thoughts. Fire and wire new behaviors. Create new chemicals and feelings and get familiar with that. That's crossing the river of change. Yeah, there's a biological death, but that's leaving behind the old, right? People do that, and some people change in 13 months. They heal in 13 months. They heal in 8 months. They heal in 4 months. But along the way, they get signals. For me, with my own injury, that first time I felt my toes again, I was just like, man, that's it. I was like a dog on the bone. I knew it. That's the process. You evolve your experience and you start practicing paying more attention to nothing with that frequency, that non-local. I mean, how do you explain the quantum? Take away everything physical and material. Take away all the objects, bodies, the people, the things, the places, the earth, the moon, the planets, the moons from the planets, the light from the planets, the sun, the light from the sun, the stars, the light from the stars, the galaxies. Take away everything material and physical. You're left with a vacuum, a void. And it just turns out that vacuum and void, there's an enormous amount of information, an enormous amount of energy. And if the atom is 99.9999999% nothing in information, and you're made of atoms, then I'm missing out on a lot of you, and all I'm doing is capturing a symbol that my brain is wired to perceive. I mean, the brain has been shaped and molded over generations untold to live in survival. And when you're in survival, the only thing you're putting your attention is on the material world, because those hormones cause us to become materialists. So you keep narrowing your focus on the predator, on the danger, and you're looking for food, and the brain is going to be sculpted and molded over thousands and thousands of years to just perceive the frequency of light that's bouncing off the most stable form of energy, the slowest frequency that we perceive with our senses, that fool us into the illusion of separation. Well, the quantum field, there could be no physical world without the quantum. In other words, it's not this field the matter that's emitting a field. It's the field that's actually lowering its frequency and creating matter. So if your body is 99.9999% energy and frequency and information actually outlives matter, then there's a whole unknown self that we have to become aware of.
Wow.
And there's an enormous amount of possibilities that exist in that field that we would never, ever, ever become aware of unless we had a new experience. And every new experience causes us to think about possibilities we would have never thought before until we had that experience.
Yes.
And that's when it gets super exciting. So people come to our work for health. Yes, it's important because they have the lack of it. People come for success and wealth because they have the lack of it. People come because they want to have a mystical experience because they lack of it, because they want love in their life because they have the lack of it. They come for all those reasons in the beginning, but what we discovered is that they're really coming for wholeness. And, it's really hard to want when you're whole. And, I discovered that when people are really whole and they're happy with themselves, they're happy with others. And when they love themselves, they love others. And when they're grateful for what they've accomplished, they're grateful with others. If they're angry with themselves, they're angry with others. If they hate themselves, they hate others. If they judge themselves, they judge others. Yeah, it's the way it is. So we see an emergent consciousness at the end of 7 days. We had 90 different countries at the last event,
Wow.
From all over the world. And all over the world, people come together at the end of 7 days. There's an emergent community. There's a emergence that takes place, like the school of fish, like the flock of birds,
Yes.
behave the same way collectively. And what happens is there's an emergent consciousness, and it's being reflected in people's biology in 7 days. And it's not one person, it's not two people, it's the majority of the collective, and collective networks of observers determine reality. And it's not the number of people.
So true.
It's not the amount of energy. You can have entropic energy. It really is the most coherent signal. Get people with brain and heart coherence. I said in Switzerland just a couple weeks ago, over 8,000 people at that event. I said, where else in the world would you see 8,000 people, the same place at the same time, meditating on the same thing? Get a collective in that kind of coherent state. They're actually altering the field right in the present moment. There's energy for miracles. We see them all the time. There's energy for healing. We see it all the time. There's energy for the mystical. We see it all the time. And because the collective, it's in their consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. You can't have a thought without frequency. So the collective consciousness coming together is creating an alteration in possibilities. Get people sitting next to each other and their hearts go into coherence, into order, and their field that's being emitted meters wide is interfering with the person next to them, and it starts to synchronize. And when waves come together, they start building, they interfere, and they produce bigger amplitudes. Higher the amplitude, the higher the energy.
Yes.
So you see the collective coming together over the course of 7 days, and by the end of 7 days, people feel like their future has already happened.
Yes.
And so when their future already happens, you stop obsessing about when it's going to happen and why it's going to happen. It's impossible to do that when you're in a state of wholeness because you're not in lack. And that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, you feel like you are love. You feel like I am love.
Yeah.
I'm not searching for love. I'm not searching for more money or more relationships to feel it because I am it.
That's a different consciousness.
And that's the experience that I got from going to your event for 7 days. And I know it's the experience that thousands of people that were there got. And there were so many mystical moments for myself and Martha, but so many others that were sharing. It was mind-blowing. And there's a few things, I could have you talk for hours, but I want to be mindful of your time because we could go on about so many different things. There's a few things I want people to do right now. Number one, I want them to watch your movie. We'll have it linked up, but where you can go and watch it in the description below. So go watch that because it's going to give you more data, research, science from the scientists who've been studying these practices. So if you've ever thought about just meditation in general, is this a waste of my time or not? You're going to get your answers. You're going to get more answers about your work and how you specifically teach this. So that's the first thing. Second thing, download one of your meditations. I love the morning and evening meditation. They're very easy to get started with. They're about 15, 17 minutes. There's an explanation before of what you're going to learn and how you should tap into it. I recommend it. download those. You can get them anywhere on your website specifically, but on iTunes or anywhere you want to download it.
It's basically what we just talked about.
Exactly.
You're going to start in the morning and you're going to decide who you no longer want to be. You're going to decide who you want to be, and you're going to remember to not think this way, to not remind yourself to not think, act, and feel this way. And you're going to remind yourself to think, act, and feel this way. And then at the end of the day, you're going to ask yourself, how did I do?
You're to reflect.
How did I do? Where did I fall from grace? When did I go unconscious? When did I get angry? Oh, another shot. Tomorrow's another day. I want it. I want to be in that same circumstance where I behave differently, where I react emotionally differently. That thought kept coming up. I'm going to finish the thought in the meditation, and the rest of my day, I'm not going to allow that thought to slip by my awareness unchecked. I'm going to catch every voice, every thought. So it's a great way to do what we just did. The 20 minute, that's probably one of the most popular meditations because it's easy. I just did a 30-minute one too. That's again a little bit longer, a little different music. But
But if you're just getting started, check out the morning and evening one. I think they're great. There's a ton of them that you have that I think everyone should download, but get started there. The next thing I want you guys to do is if you have the chance to go to a 7-day retreat with Dr. Joe, I think they're sold out for the next 2 years probably, but they sell out within like 15 minutes. And if you get the chance, go sign up for Dr. Joe's email newsletter so you can be notified of when the events are out, and just be ready to get your ticket because it's really hard to get your ticket right now. I've got so many friends that try to book it all the time. They're like, we missed it by 10 minutes and they sold out. So it's a life-changing experience. If you feel called, like this is something you want to try, go sign up for the newsletter at your website. We'll have that link below. The next thing, we mentioned this in the intro to this interview, Dr. Joe is going to be a featured speaker at Summit of Greatness. So if you haven't got your ticket yet for that, if his event has already been sold out, get a ticket for Summit of Greatness. We'll link that below. You can hear him speak and learn more about this in person at that event at Summit of Greatness.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be amazing. I'm pumped. Yeah. I'm really excited. It's here in LA, September, so make sure you guys check that out. And then also, we have an Amazon book club with thousands of people in the book club. So if you're not a member of that yet, Dr. Joe's book, we're going to choose one and make that the featured book of the month. So it'll go out to all those people. Get a book, read it. I can't remember which book this one was from.
That's Supernatural.
Supernatural, Becoming Supernatural.
I do want to say one thing just for the listener and the viewer. I think knowledge is the forerunner to experience. I really think, the 3 testimonials I witnessed just recently in the 3 last events we did, the most amazing thing is that all those people were self-taught. They read the books. They didn't just do the I don't really want people to do the meditation without reading the content, because they won't understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's so important for us to build models of understanding and really review the information. People who really heal, they really study it and they go, this makes sense. If I feel this emotion and my body's so objective, it's going to believe it's living in a new environment. If the environment signals the gene, and genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of my body, the expression of life, I'm going to intentionally feel this emotion to signal genes. We found out in one study, 100% of the people, that when they felt the emotion and had the intention to signal the gene, they signaled the gene, 100% of them. So it's important for us to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So the meditation, the morning and evening meditation, as an example, listen to the explanation because it'll help you understand. If it loses the magic, you forgot what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it's now conjecture, it's superstition, it's dogma. You got to go back in and relearn it. And when my meditations get kind of flat like that, I go back and I restudy again because there's something that I'm not putting my intention behind doing. So if you read the book or you do the preparatory course for the week long, it's really important to understand the information, because the meditation, you can assign meaning and have intention behind it. And that's when you get the best outcomes.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to have this as the book for this month's book club. Again, make sure you guys check that out. I got to be mindful of your time because you got to get out of here. But I want to acknowledge you for, I can't remember how many times we've had you on, 5, 6, 7, maybe in the last 5 years. But every time you come on, people are blown away and people get healings just from hearing you speak and connecting the dots or the things that are unseen and allowing them to see them within themselves. So I want to acknowledge you for constantly being a force for good, for showing up almost a year of your life has been doing events, these week-long events over the last kind of, 7-8 years, I guess.
I assure you that more of my life has been dedicated to events than just week-longs, but yes, week-longs, yeah.
But for just week-longs, you've done 50 week-long events in the last, since you started them. And I love watching you continue to transform. Since I've known you, I think it's 5-6 years ago when we first met, seeing you not just say, I'm, a guy who's got the answers now and I'm just going to teach you and I'm not going to keep evolving. Like you keep evolving as a human, as an individual, physically, mentally, spiritually. And I appreciate seeing that from someone who's constantly teaching, because sometimes you see people teaching that, let themselves go.
Yeah, I think I'm super inspired. I mean, in the last couple of years, Louis, I think I was more surprised than anybody. I mean, seeing blind people see, like people with muscular dystrophy. I mean, look that up. Look that up. Go Wikipedia and they'll tell you there is no cure. Out of the wheelchair, walking back into his life, had a huge moment. ALS, terminal cancers, stage 4 cancers, metastatic cancer of the bones. The testimonials have humbled me. Growing a thyroid back. I mean, come on. That's unbelievable.
Wow.
It's unbelievable for me. And I watch the testimonials, some of these 50 times in a row, because it's unbelievable for me. So I'm so humbled because I'm watching, those people are my heroes. They're really doing some really unbelievable things. When I look at the data and I see it's not just 18% of the population has a 30% change in the right parietal lobe, It's not like that.
Right.
It's 77%, 84%, 100% of the population. The probability that it could happen to you and I is really, really high. So when I see the data, I keep saying to the scientists, I can't believe this is the truth. I just can't believe it's the truth. So I'm changing and learning because I don't know what, I can't say it doesn't work any longer. I'm super open to whatever the next level is.
What is the next level?
I don't know. We're doing now, we saw that intention can manufacture chemicals in the autonomic nervous system intentionally. So we've spent the last few months intentionally creating the molecules that are released from a part of the brain that create mystical experiences, very profound, like DMT and those derivatives. And people have had some very big moments without any exogenous, without ever taking anything outside.
All internal.
Yeah, now I'm clear that the autonomic nervous system, give it the right intent, and the intent is translated as information. You don't have to know how to make Serpin A5. You don't have to know how to make dimethyltryptamine. Wow. The autonomic nervous system is it's our servant, right? Open the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, plant the seed, keep doing it, and sooner or later your biology will change. So every new experiment we have, we sit down and we go, oh my God, let's think about a way to do this with another molecule. If it's working like this and working like that, what if we do this, right? So our advanced follow-ups, they're changing so much because we're experimenting with if it's worked this way and this way, it's got to work this way. And so we try it, and we're developing devices and instrumentation to measure things that haven't been created yet, because it's insane.
Man, I'm so excited to go to advanced follow-up.
Dude, you're invited.
It's going to be amazing.
Wait a second. You're no longer invited.
I know.
That's how I got you to the week. You cannot come ever. You cannot come to one of my advanced follow-ups.
It's happening.
No, you can't come.
Well, I just showed someone on my team a photo of me at the 7-day event where I had the brain mapping machine or device on my head, and I was just like, I can only imagine what it's like going back almost 2 years later on how far the advances have been in the last 2 years, what the research shows, the data, the science. And again, you're going to see a lot of that in the Source documentary film, so make sure to watch that. But
yeah, so the science in the Source is 2 years old.
It's already outdated compared to what's evolved.
We're going to do a docuseries. I mean, just for example, on the microbiome, on the endogenous opiates, on breast milk, on the neurotrophic factors that create new neurons.
It's amazing.
We paired young people with old people. for 7 days. And the most dramatic changes we've ever seen in our event is when a young person hangs out with an old person and eats together, and it teaches the information back to the other person, does their meditations. They score higher on all cognitive tests, both the old and the young.
Wow.
Their brain function in the frontal lobe is amplified into gamma. Their whole entire brain is relaxed in alpha. I mean, it's just like, we have all kinds of crazy studies we're doing. So now we're going to pair mothers with their daughters and mothers with their sons, because mitochondrial DNA comes from the mother. So we're going to see if mitochondrial DNA changes. I mean, we just got all these crazy
incredible
things. Yeah.
Incredible.
We're working with the Navy SEALs now in the military.
Wow.
And we're working with prisons, a lot of prisons around Latin America and the United States. And we're doing some great studies too with those guys too.
Dr. Joe, you're amazing. I wish we didn't stop. I want to go for hours, but thank you so much for your time.
Louis, it's always a pleasure.
Amazing, man. Incredible.
The majority of people function in a state of stress, in a state of survival.
We use Western medicine and it does a bunch of things for us, but something's missing.
My name is Joe Dispenza. I run an organization called Encephalon. We teach people the neuroscience and the biology of how to change, how to transform.
There is an effect of meditation, and we can measure it.
For the first time in the history of meditation studies, a group of scientists have discovered something really profound that's happening inside someone's body when they apply this formula.
We have data to suggest and evidence to suggest that you're changing.
By the end of that meditation, I didn't need the wheelchair at all.
He said, Charlie, there's no cancer. There was nothing, was zero, absent.
We have just scratched the surface. This is just the beginning to understanding our human potential.
In order for us to find love, a part of us must die.
Ooh, wait. Why do we need to die to find love, or part of us?
Because anything that's not love in us must die.
Oh.
And that's the difference between knowing the path and walking the path, right? So one of the things that